ocean strategy, basically it is based on a decade-long study about 150 strategic moves. It talks about how there's red oceans and blue ocean. Jim, do you want to tell us what's a red ocean?
Lots of competitors.
Right, lots of competitors. So what are your chances of being successful in a red ocean?
Not as good as if you're in a blue ocean. Because if you're in a red ocean, everybody's just fighting each other.
Right, right. So you want to find the blue oceans, which are your areas of uncontested space. So when you're creating and defining MVP, then you really want to find the area where it's going to be like an area you can really accelerate and then differentiate yourself in the market. Then basically value innovation. So it talks about value innovation as well. So ways to find areas of value that are going to span across a lot of different boundaries and channels and things like that. So it goes into all of that as well and talks about how companies that do disrupt then go into other areas that were formerly unrealized. And when we get into the examples, we'll see a couple of examples of companies that have done that and get an idea of what that means. Empowering through tools and frameworks. So sometimes the innovation isn't in the product, but it might be the way that a company is doing things, right, or the way they're operationalizing something. They might start out with a product and then also change the way that they
Shave Club.
Yeah, right.
They started selling razors rather than at a drugstore or whatever. They mail ordered them and got that thing. So
right, yeah.
As an existing product, they didn't do anything innovative with the product. They just innovated on the delivery.
Right, right, exactly.
Color shade board.
Great example, thank you. Basically, it does create a win-win outcome for everybody, right, by creating this new strategy. Allows the business to really realize unrealized revenue, and then for the clients, right, the products will obviously be very valuable and something that they haven't gotten yet. And then examples like we know about Apple with iTunes when they brought iTunes into the market. University of Phoenix with their online programs, they were like the kings of online education. They started out by disrupting the industry by getting rid of the brick and mortar. They went into a non-traditional route, whereas if they would have stayed in the traditional brick and mortar, they would have gone out of business. Companies become extinct. There's also a book called From Clayton Christensen as well. Yeah, exactly. It talks about all that, but all of my areas of passion for sure. Blue ocean strategy, so we talked about it, the high demand and profitable growth, pursues differentiation and low cost value innovation, and then uses the value innovation to determine the patterns of buyer behavior for products, services, and strategy. So again, it doesn't necessarily have to be the product. I think the important takeaway here is it could be services, and especially now where everything's as a service, that's very important, or even microservices. And then strategy, so even the internal corporate strategies, like HR strategies, right? For what you do, Nancy, if you come up with a new way of how you're doing your hiring, that could be like the MVP of one company over another. So there's lots of different ways that you can spin this. Blue Ocean Shift is the next book from the same authors, which is Kim and Lawborn. What you want to do is find what the market creating strategies are. So what Blue Ocean Shift did is it took the book Blue Ocean Strategy one step farther by providing the tools that they used out in the field to actually go about helping companies define, right, their MVP and find their blue oceans. So the whole purpose of Blue Ocean Shift is to have the companies find ways to create uncontested growth by finding their blue oceans. So there was a need for help in this area because for somebody that doesn't know how to do it, how do you create a blue ocean, right? So they need a little bit of help. So this gives you the steps of how to help. Putting my management consultant hat on here, these are the steps that I would bring to a client. So you want to find the market creating strategies. You remember that creative destruction and innovation are only part of the picture, that non-disruptive creation also generates new markets and growth. So that's a really important point there. So what you want to do are the 5 steps that if you were doing something like this and going to an organization, the first thing you do is want to scope out the initiative. What are your goals for transformation and change? So you start with why, right? As Simon Sinek says, you start with why. So what is the reason that the company wants to transform, and what are the top 3 problems to solve? Even with my work right now with Wells Fargo, that's kind of what we're looking at. In fact, we're going into another planning session, and what we're doing to rearrange the epics is really looking at the top 3 problems. Once that's decided, then we'll map around the epics and decide what we want to go after and how we want to attack the value streams first. The next thing you do, and this is very similar to value stream mapping, I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, Karen Martin and all of that, but you do a current state mapping. So you determine what is your current state and what are you doing to determine your current state. You get into your MVP, you find what your most innovative products are, and then you find your most valuable products and product lines. So those are some of the areas that you're looking at. Once you have your current state set up and you have all your processes on the wall, now you imagine what are your blue oceans, what does the future look like? And here's where you can get creative, right? You can use mind mapping, you can use a lot of techniques to really help come up with some new ideas and out of box, where no idea is discounted, right? Where anything that is completely different in terms of how you're going to approach things are mapped out. And then you can go through a ranking system where they're talked about and then decided on by the executives which way you want to go, what your most important product line would be to create, and then now go after your blue oceans. So now you've talked about the blue oceans, you would also stack rank those, so maybe there's one blue ocean that looks particularly attractive. Now what are your products and your product lines that go with that? And then if you're changing the corporate strategy, if you're changing how they do processes, then what are the dependencies there? And then you can map all of this out. From there, now you're ready to execute and make your moves. So what you can do is conduct the small market tests using MVP. Again, putting my management consulting hat on, this is really the tool set to make the blue ocean strategy work and find your blue oceans. Yes?
More a
Jim?
comment than a question. You got to be careful when you're trying to assess the value of those different things you might be doing.
Right.
Because it may not be the revenue you're generating directly from it, or it may not be today's revenue, it might be a future revenue. So an example, I worked in a lab instrument company, it was $500 million, and I built a $30 million software portfolio in there. So relatively speaking, it was a small contribution, but
Right,
that was
right.
a beachhead we used to get into all kinds of accounts that wouldn't touch our stuff until they played with the software and they went, oh, we like this, what else you got? So it was you got to be careful of how you go about assessing those.
Right, yeah, it's a good
Take
point.
those
Yeah, and then that's how you, when it's discussed in terms of what you're going to go after first, what your product lines and your products are, those are all the things that have to be kind of rationalized, right?
Yeah,
And
not
then
just
you start
today's
out with the
sales.
experiments, and then using innovation accounting, you can figure out, where your bursts are much faster. So, but thank you. Talking about MVP and the lean startup, so let's move forward and talk about that. Eric Ries, of course, came up with Lean Startup, where when he's talking about product, he's talking about finding MVP and basically using the short cycles of doing build, measure, learn, from going from your initial idea, where you start out with your idea funnel, which we talked about in Blue Ocean Shift, right, is really coming up with the new things, your new blue oceans. So in blue ocean speak, the ideas are the blue ocean, and then you go through and start building things, right? Then you have your product that you experiment with to try to find your MVP. Then you measure, and then based on the data, you can course correct. You go back through the cycle, where you continue to go through and you build, measure, learn, and then you iterate, and then you iterate much faster. Now in the enterprise environment and in scaled agile, even at the portfolio level, you're able to do this at the top level and then decide what items in your portfolio that you can go through and which ones are valuable, which ones aren't valuable. So you're going through and stack ranking them in your on your Kanban board in your portfolio. MVP in the Lean Startup. First of all, the prime directive of the MVP is to deliver value. And then that's where it aligns with Agile, because the key directive of Agile is to be able to deliver products that are valuable to the client and ensure that it is. Again, with MVP, you're doing it much faster. You can experiment, you can course correct and adjust before you even get into your iterations, right? So it just allows you a little bit more flexibility. We talked about the revenue, and I think, Jim, that was kind of what you were talking about with some of your examples with some of the companies that you were giving for.
Yeah, just be careful how you measure.
Right.
And look at long-term and
Right.
broad, not just the day-to-day money that a particular thing
Right.
brings in.
So when you come back, then you're charging from day one and getting paid. Basically, as soon as you start building the product, and with things with like more services and microservices, even from right at the beginning, you can actually start to realize value. You can start to realize revenue. So that's one of the things that you can do with innovation accounting, and if it's done well, that you can actually measure your CapEx and your OpEx and then put that into the model, whereas you're not waiting 5 years for something that's operationalized. You can actually start realizing value for your product a lot faster. So that's the goal, is to realize the value as soon as possible.
Some I hear from say, make sure you go beyond the MVP though. You want to get to the minimum lovable product so that it markets itself rather than it being just barely good enough.
Yeah, don't stop there, exactly. Getting back to the MVP definition, the MVP is the version of the new product that allows the team to collect the maximum amount of validated learning about customers with the least effort. And basically the smallest thing that you can build so it can go into the build, measure, learn loop. So how small can you make it so you can iterate rapidly, experiment, make your changes, etc. And then that way you can pivot. There's what's called pivoting, and then course correct, or even toss out the product if you don't like it, right? Or if it's just not going to be relevant, something that won't be a blue ocean for you, then you toss it out. Again, MVPs can be anything from launching landing pages, working prototypes, processes, the way companies run their operations. You can make it pretty much anything an MVP, and then really have it be the prime directive of how you do business and what differentiates you from your competitors and makes you rise above the sharks, or the red oceans, as they say in blue ocean strategy. So you want to get beyond the sharks, get into your blue ocean, and then do smooth sailing from there in order to be able to realize value. Looking at SAFE, so as I said, Scaled Agile now puts the lean startup cycle in here. So this is what I was talking about at the executive level. They start with why, so you start out with the reason why and your vision and your strategy, and then now you come in with maybe your top 3, 4, or 5 items you would do, which are called themes, that go into the Kanban board. From there, they're going to go in and become epics. You might solve 3 different problems. You're looking at a specific theme to, in this case, maybe disrupt the air industry. Maybe you're Southwest, you're the Love airline, and your disruptor there was really customer service, which is one of the key areas, and the peanuts. When I was in school for my doctorate, one of the students would always do projects on Southwest and bringing the peanuts in. From there, you go in and you decide, like, now what are the 3 problems you want to solve, and then stack rank those problems. From there, you have your epics. And then you can rearrange the epics depending on which problem you decide you want to solve and which blue oceans you want to go after, or what MVP. And then you actually go in and build that MVP. So what is it? In the case of Southwest, it might be the awesome hiring, or hiring the right people, right, Nancy, since you're in HR. So maybe it was getting the right people, or the people that are really warm and friendly and customer servicey. So maybe that's their MVP that they would bring in. At any rate, so you build it, you evaluate it, and evaluate it quickly. From there, depending on which way you want to pivot, now you can add additional features, additional epics, stories, new stories, discard, etc. Now you're going to pivot, decide what did it do for you. So that's where you get into the measure area, and then the learning. You go back through and go back through your cycle. Decide, what did you learn about that problem? Did this really help solve the problem? Is it really going to get you into the new blue ocean? And then maybe have some quick metrics that you use to try to track it in terms of CSAT or NPR or whatever it might be that you're using to kind of get a read on how effective it was. At any rate, this is baked into Scaled Agile now, that it is important enough that a lot of companies now are really focusing on finding those blue oceans or those innovations now at a very early stage so that they can change the way that they're doing things. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be a new product. It could be a process. It could be something as simple as hiring practices that are within the organization.